Hey guys, welcome back. As you can see, winter has finally shown up here in Michigan. Last week we had a pretty good storm move through. We have just about 26 inches of snow here on the ground just northeast of Grand Rapids. So I thought that this would be a good opportunity to talk about something that we can do to help our deer herd out during this stressful time period. Depending on where your property is located and also depending on the year, the weather will be different from year to year. For example, just this year, we had a very mild winter up until last week, mid-January. But most properties here in Michigan and throughout the northern part of the country, most years will experience significant snowfall a few times throughout the winter, which is going to increase the stress levels on the local deer herd. As we push further into winter, the food sources on your property and throughout the area, they start to dwindle. There's not nearly as much food now in the deer woods as there was a few months ago. And as you can see, we do have a lot of snow on the ground as well, making the very little food that is available harder to get to. So the deer are going to have to spend a lot of energy to get to that food source. They might even spend more energy trying to get to that food than they'll receive from consuming it. But as a property owner or a land manager, there is something pretty easy that you can do right now to help these deer get through this stressful time period and help them get to spring. While there are a few things that we can be doing on our property to help deer both conserve energy and replenish it throughout the winter months, in today's video, I really just want to be focusing on one of those. It's pretty chilly out here today. I think it's around 10 degrees, probably a little bit lower with the wind chill. And I didn't really make the best hat choice for the weather, but because I just got these new hats made with a little bit of a different logo. Let me know what you guys think. This is a logo of the deer that we harvested this past season, the one that my son and I watched for most of the season through trail cameras, and he helped me track it down. So it's a very special deer for me, so I kind of wanted to maybe update the logo with a silhouette of that deer. But yeah, probably not the best hat choice today with 10 degrees. But anyways, on to what we can do on our property to help the deer during this stressful time period. And I think what comes to mind for a lot of us when we're thinking about helping deer get through the winter is providing a winter food source. And that can come in a variety of different ways. Maybe a late season food plot with brassicas, maybe some cereal rye, standing corn, maybe some standing soybeans. There are a lot of things that we can plant on our properties that will help deer get through the winter months. But for those of us that have smaller fields, smaller areas for food plots, we can't really justify putting in a lot of standing corn or have standing soybeans. We rely more on those brassica plots or maybe a plot topped with cereal rye. However, right now when we get a lot of snow on the ground, and last week we actually had a lot of freezing rain first, so underneath the snow is about 1.5 inches of ice. That makes it a lot harder for these deer to get to that food source. Like the powder, they can push that away pretty easily to get down to that food source. But once you start adding in ice, that makes it a lot harder for these deer to get down to that food source. And when that happens, in a lot of years it does, another thing that we can do to provide a food source for the local deer herd is by taking our chainsaw and start dropping trees to bring that top down to deer level. There is so much deer food within the canopy of the woods, and you can help bring that food down to deer level with a chainsaw. Throughout the winter, woody browse is the primary food source for whitetails. I'm pretty sure it's around 80% of their diet throughout the winter. And within that treetop, there are thousands of buds. That's a lot of deer food that you just provided to them by just cutting this tree down, bringing that top down to their level. Not only is cutting a few trees down on your property a great way to feed deer throughout the winter, it also doesn't cost you much. It only costs you the amount of gas it took to fill up the chainsaw and the amount of time that it took you to come out here and cut a few trees down. Before this storm hit Michigan last week, I was made aware that it was coming by the news and social media as they blew it out of proportion like they do with everything else. But I knew it was coming. I could see it on the forecast, so I took my chainsaw, headed out to the woods, and I dropped several red maples, several basswoods down to bring those tops down to deer level. That way, when we got the snow that we were expecting and it started to pile up and bury our food plots, that they would still have an available food source with these treetops. And you can see just from the snow on the tree behind me, we did get quite a bit of snow. And underneath that snow, like I said, is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches of ice. So it's very difficult for the deer to get down to the food within our food plots, but it's a lot easier for them to browse in that treetop that's now sitting on the forest floor. Now, there are a few species that are more desirable than others, and obviously some that are not as desirable. So if you are going to be taking time to go to your woods and start dropping trees, try to select those more desirable species. You know, I just mentioned a few of them. I really like dropping red maples, hard maples, the basswoods, oaks. You know, these are more desirable species, but I also have, I can see behind me, I have a lot of beech here. I have a lot of ironwood. Those are not as desirable. So it's not that I don't drop those trees to get sunlight to the ground, but those aren't ones that I'm specifically targeting this time of year if I'm trying to put additional food on the ground. Another thing to think about when you are dropping trees to feed deer throughout the winter is try to make sure that the trees that you're dropping fit within your plan. It makes sense to drop that tree. If you're going to spend time on your property to cut down trees, you might as well be working towards a goal. You know, are you trying to create a food plot in this area and you need sunlight to the forest floor? Maybe you're trying to create a new bedding area and you need to take trees down in this area anyway. You know, these are going to be good trees to target to drop down to feed deer. You're going to cut them down anyways. You might as well start cutting them down now. Or maybe this is an existing bedding area that needs more sunlight. You could take a few trees down in there. Or maybe it's a food plot that you notice isn't getting a lot of sunlight. So maybe you want to start targeting some trees on the southern side of that food plot. So just another thing to think about when you are cutting trees down, maybe you can accomplish two things at once. You can feed deer as well as start on a new habitat improvement or maybe work on an existing improvement. In the past, I have put cameras on these locations on the trees that I recently cut down just to show you guys how fast the deer find these things and start feeding on the tops. I didn't do that this time just because I have a lot of cameras out still in different locations, but I can see tracks. There's a trail that runs behind the camera or with the camera, but I can see tracks as they kind of come off this trail and they're working their way back to that treetop. So it's been, you know, just under a week since the snow hit and the deer are already feeding on this treetop and the other tops pretty heavily. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys, on something very easy that you can do to help your deer get through this really stressful time of the year. If you guys have any questions, please drop those in the comment section below. I'll get back to those as soon as I can, and we will see you guys in the next video.